Our audience just had the rare privilege of seeing on the big screen, The Dragon and the Wolf, the 7th season finale, just a week before the premiere airs, next Sunday on the 14th. I do want to give a huge thank you to HBO, who made a special digital 4K print for us for this. So let's go right into Westeros. Please welcome the director who resurrected Jon Snow, obliterated House Frey, and lit the army of the dead in the 70 Kingdoms, Jeremy Pottsway.
Wow, nice reception. Thanks.
All right, so we all know everybody involved in Game of Thrones has to keep their lips sealed.
Yes.
That they have any shred of information about the next season. So I swear by the old gods and the new, I will not ask a question that brings you dishonor or tries to trap you into any information.
Thank you.
So the first question, will you confirm right now that Podrick wins the Iron Throne?
Fan favorite. I can neither confirm nor deny.
All right, so you and I talked a little in the green room. We actually watched it together. You know, people watch a lot of TV now on iPhones, iPads, TV sets. What was it like being able to see the episode with a live audience in the theater?
Fantastic. I love hearing the reaction. So thank you for reacting. It's great to see the humor land. It's great to see the things that are meant to be moving. You could hear we got pin drop, which was great. It's an unusual situation, and I love it. So I'm glad you were here to see it. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, the first thing that struck us was the sound of the dragon when they landed in the pit, the surround sound moving around. So you directed, you know, let's list some of your credits: 6 Feet Under, True Detective, The Tudors, Handmaid's Tales, and many others. So what is different about directing a Game of Thrones episode as compared to anything else?
Game of Thrones is unlike anything else. I think it's unlike anything else to watch as a viewer, and I think to make it, it's an entirely different experience. Every episode is really like making a movie. And we typically will block shoot 2 episodes at a time, so it's 2 hours, so it really is like a movie. And it's very expansive in terms of the production, so we're shooting in 3 or 4 countries, depending. I was shooting chiefly in Northern Ireland and Belfast, but also shooting in Spain and Croatia. The episode where the ice dragon is created was shot in Iceland, in part. So, and in the past seasons, they've shot in Morocco and many other places as well. So it's, that's not typical for a TV show to be shooting all over the place. And the schedule is really expansive. It takes about 6 months of the director's time to work, to prep, to shoot, and to edit. The shows are in post-production for another 6 months after that with all the visual effects. It's a really complex process, and what you're being tasked with as a director is something that's quite unusual in that it's such an enormous ensemble. The storytelling is so huge in scope. It's really different. It's sometimes like when I was doing the show, I was longing for like a show where it's like 2 people in a room talking, and going back to my 6 Feet Under days. But then when you do that, it's like, oh, I kind of miss not having 8,000 people and dragons and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's an unbelievable pleasure to do the show because it's so unique, and the things that make it complicated and difficult are also the things that make it great.
Let's go back to the beginning, pre-production. What was your reaction when you read the script of Dragon and the Wolf?
Well, many reactions. Well, of course, the wall coming down, I was like, oh my God. I thought people are going to lose when they see this. So there was that. And then, but, and also it's the question of like, oh my, how are we going to do that? I mean, that's such a big moment, and it really has to land, in a very amazing and impressive way. And so there's that. And then the Dragon Pit was really something when I read it. It was a very unusual thing for this show because it's basically, like, when you get to the end of the Dragon Pit, like the very end of that sequence when Cersei comes back and says she'll join everybody, she's lying, but she comes back. That's the length of a normal episode. Like that, it's almost an entire episode that's like the lead up to the Dragon Pit and the Dragon Pit. And then you have all that stuff that comes after. So it's like, it's a massive episode. And that just the stuff in the Dragon Pit is about 30 or 40 pages of script, which is highly unusual, because even though there's lots of unusual things that are sort of things that break up the dialogue, like the dragon Dany arriving on dragon and the white coming out and all that stuff, it's still largely like a play. It's like a 30 or 40 minute play with all the characters in the show except for the few that are left in Winterfell. And So it's a very unusual TV thing to do, a scene that's kind of like that, and it's a very unusual thing for Game of Thrones to do something like that. So when I read that, I was like, that is a long time for people to be like just talking, and there's a lot of stuff that has to be serviced in that scene because their characters haven't seen each other in many episodes, many seasons. Some characters I've never met before. They only know each other by reputation. There's so much story to be told, and a lot of it is nonverbal too. Mm-hmm. So as a filmmaker, you have to make sure that everything lands, like every moment, every beat, every relationship is serviced, every story point is made, everything is told in the way that it needs to be told. But it's a very complex kind of thing to do in a way that when you read it on the page seems like that, if not treated properly, it could actually be not so interesting to watch. But I felt very strongly with this cast and with for the audience, I think, who knows the show and has been following it really closely, mm-hmm. there's so many interesting, subtle moments through the whole thing that it would carry through. But we had to treat this as its own singular kind of thing was never really done on the show. So we did rehearse it like a play. For the first time ever, I think, in the history of the show, we got almost the entire cast together in Belfast in pre-production, and we staged it like a play, and we went through it in great detail. So we went through like whatever questions the actors would have about different moments, and we talked about everybody's relationship to everybody else and what it would mean to be in this place and what it would mean for you to see this person for the first time, and all those kinds of things. We got all that stuff sort of discussed and worked through, and just the blocking of how everybody's going to sit and how far away they were going to be from each other. Part of the challenge of this thing too is that we had this location which we had found, which is this amazing Coliseum in Spain, which had never been used in a film shoot before. And we had to, the place was so massive that, you couldn't dwarf the action in the space. You have to somehow find a way that the set that we were building within that large location, with the canopies and the chairs and all that stuff, it was going to feel appropriate to the scale of that space, but also not have people so far apart from each other that they couldn't, interact and speak. They wouldn't have to scream at each other across this yawning, space. And so we really had to like test the exact dimension, like how far each chair should be from each other, how we should build these platforms, how big they should be, all those kinds of things. And we rehearsed all that, and we moved chairs around and made sure everybody was happy with everything, and it all worked. And all the other bits of business with the White Walker and all these other things, and just sort of figuring all that stuff out was sort of a big thing. So it was a gigantic rehearsal that we did in Belfast, which I have to say the cast really loved, because they never really had an opportunity to do that before in anything. And I think they were all a bit daunted when they read the script. They were like, oh my God, it's so dense and layered, and there's so much happening, subtextually in the scene. And so, they were really happy to have that time to work through all that stuff without the pressure of shooting. You don't have that clock ticking constantly.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those beats. Let's start with Bronn and Tyrion, the leading up to it. Both characters are gruff and reluctant to voice their, the feelings and affection. However, they do share a sweet, subtle moment. How did you ensure that those two characters remain heartfelt while maintaining the characters' kind of surliness?
Yeah, well, I think, you're dealing with such fine actors, and I think they know their history so well in the show. And, I think they've always had that kind of bantery relationship that's, there's conflict, but there's also a kind of mutual appreciation. And they both have a sense of humor, which has been evident through the whole series. So I think, they know how to play it. The challenge in something like this is when, they're doing it on the move. That entire first part of the sequence is this gigantic train of people that's walking towards the dragon pit, and it's also the cart and with the box and soldiers and Dothraki and everything. There's everything. There's this gigantic train that has to move, and they're at the front of it. But every time you do a take, you got to back up the whole train, and then they come back again. And we were shooting at quite long takes too with those things. So it's a lot of walking and a lot of huffing and puffing, and trying not to do that too much as you're walking and talking and just showing all the subtle things that you need to show. And so it was. I think the way we broke it down was we did like a day of all the walking stuff, because it was quite substantial. And the first meeting at the beginning when they arrive at the dragon pit and they meet Bronn and Brienne.
And I did like with Brienne and the Hound.
Yes.
Because they don't, Bronn can tell his stories like he always does. Yeah. They were both almost completely nonverbal, their affection for each other. So was there anything you had special with those two to get that, or they just kind of had that chemistry? And
They definitely have that chemistry, and they're both also such fine actors that, I mean, with those kind of things, like we always have a conversation about how much you want to show and how much not to show, how much to hold back, how much to reveal, how much are you showing to the other person or not, or what's just for the audience to see, or what's being shared. So we have all those kinds of conversations, but they're all such beautiful actors. They all bring those moments and really bring them to life.
I love the script line. There's in the script, which we gave the excerpt to, a rare smile from the Hound, which is obviously against his character.
Yeah.
But it's, so speaking of the Hound, how fun was it to set up, hopefully, the inevitable Season 8 Clegane Bowl between the Hound and the Mountain? We're hoping.
What do I know? It was a really fun moment, actually. But again, it's one of those things, like when you read it on the page, you think, oh, that's a great moment, but they're holding up this gigantic summit, right? And so there's all this anticipation for this thing happening, and before anybody gets a word out, you have this kind of like weird interaction. And so as a director, it's always like, is that going to work? Like, does that make, in front of Cersei, he's going to walk up and do that whole thing? But I think the actors make it work, and I think the writers are so clever too that there were times when I would be like, I'm not really sure about that. But then you put it up on its feed and you get the actors doing it and it really works. And it becomes a great, very memorable moment, in fact. But it has to be staged too. Like, that's the thing. Like in rehearsal, you find the staging of it and how that all happens.
So there's a rule that I like to live: always arrive fashionably late, and Daenerys certainly believes in that. Yeah. But you have a lot of actors in a smaller set. How did you balance with working with a visual effects artist, because you had the dragon coming?
Yes.
Trying not to overshadow, make the scene too complicated, but actually feel the dragon and the.
Well, that moment has to be a moment. I mean, her arrival is such a I don't want to say the words, but it's definitely an FU to Cersei. And I think that it has to be like a really big moment, her arrival on the dragon. So those kind of things are all storyboarded ahead of time with as much discussion about them. And typically in anything like that, whether it's the arrival of the dragon or the wall coming down, those are sequences that are, I will first storyboard, and I do very bad drawings. And I'll do my bad drawings, then I'll work with a proper storyboard artist who will take my bad drawings and make them into better drawings that can be shared with other people. And then they'll be shown to the producers, Dan and David, who are creators of the show, and they'll have some notes often, and like, it would be great if we did this, for example, or the visual effects people have an idea. Like, I think it was their idea that before we see anything, we just see the shadow go across the walls of the Colosseum. I think that was a notion that came from the VFX people. But anyway, so we'll work out all those kind of fine details of what the sequence will ultimately be. And once we have a storyboard of that, then we'll do an animatic or a sort of like a filmed storyboard, which becomes a 3D animation thing that everybody will know what the sequence is and what are the live action parts of it that we shoot and what gets created later. And then, it's like, how do we get Dany off the dragon? How do we get her into the Colosseum? And all those kind of things are very technical, but we figure them out once we kind of know. Like, we just imagine it in our imaginations, and then we figure out practically how to do it.
I did like, though, but in the moment of, you have this grand moment, I actually really like the subtle moments of cutting to Dany looking at Cersei. I mean, Tyrion looking at Cersei, just to study the reactions, of Jaime, and those kind of little quiet, very powerful moments, but quiet moments.
Well, I think to me, those are the hallmark moments of the show, and this is what I think is so great about Game of Thrones, is that the technical stuff or the fantasy elements or the visual effectsy parts of it never overshadow the story you're actually telling, which is all about character. And so if you didn't have those moments of like, what does this mean, the way she's arriving like that? What does it mean to Tyrion? What does it mean to Cersei? Why, like, we're doing this for a reason. She's landing on, it's not just because it looks great, but we're doing it because it's really a point that Dany is making to Cersei, and that has to land. And then Tyrion, when we have all these actors there, in that moment, and I know that we had a discussion with every single one of those actors, like, what does this arrival by Dany mean to you? If we cut to you at this moment, what's happening? These are not all scripted. These are things we have to discuss with everybody who's present. And it was clear to me in the editing that, that Tyrion has a moment just to see how Cersei's going to react to this arrival of Dany. And there are other people that we cut to. All those are discussed moments with the actors in terms of what are you clocking in this moment? What is the most important thing to you when this happens? And then editorially, we can sort of put a scene together, which has now texture and color and flavor, and tells a deeper story than it's just somebody arriving on a dragon. It's all about how it impacts everybody else and what they're thinking about in that moment.
Well, that's just good. Daenerys and Cersei are definitely one of the two most powerful people in the show. And you actually want to highlight the meeting scene. What did you want to? What was important to you to highlight the individual power and their confrontation in that scene?
Well, it's two queens. You know, you got two queens together, and stuff's going to happen. And I think these are like mortal enemies who are being brought together in a kind of very artificial construct, not because they want to be in the same space together, but they need to be because there's a common cause. And I think there should be a huge amount of tension within that. And I think that we set up quite early in that scene that if the summit goes bad, it can really hit the fan. You know, like if the consequences of this going bad are enormous in two ways. It can go bad, and Cersei can decide to just kill everybody there because she's got the place surrounded, and they all come in without any, army backup. Or it could go bad in terms of the whole summit falls apart, and then there's nobody to fight the army of the dead, and then it's bad for everybody. So the summit has to go well, right? And so the thing is, are these two queens going to be able to get it together and overcome whatever the issues are between them for the greater, good? So to me, the entire scene is fraught, with that perspective.
Yeah, and of course, Cersei asked Jon Snow not to take sides. Mm-hmm. And for once, we're hoping a Stark lie. Will you please lie?
Yeah.
What were the discussions with Kit Harington? Because he is putting the realm in jeopardy, but you want to make sure he keeps the audience feeling, understanding what he did.
But it's absolutely consistent with his character, I think, because he's a character who has a very strong sense of morality, and he doesn't lie. And so this would be the first time, I think, if he ever did lie, that he did. So I think that there was no discussion with Kit about, like, do you believe this or not buy it? It's, of course, that's what he's going to do. But then, of course, that also has implications for everybody else who's involved in this thing, and that's what makes it so interesting. So, yeah, I think it's...
So it's a lot of working with the other actors reacting to it.
Yes.
Yeah, in that sense, because we know Jon Snow would do that.
Yes, they know, but I think that they're all hoping against... Well, first of all, not everybody knows that he's done this. That's the thing. Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a revelation to other people who are his friends, who they don't know that he's bent the knee to Daenerys at this point. So for them, it's just like oh my God moment, because that's not good.
This does lead to probably one of my favorite scenes of the whole entire series. We've been waiting years for Tyrion and Cersei to face off. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Tyrion is one of the smartest people on the show, and Cersei is one of the most cunning and smart in a different way. What is it about Peter Dinklage and Lena Headey and what they bring to their performances that make their nuanced characters so believable and fierce?
I love them so much as actors and as human beings, and they're so great together. And I think that moment is something that, if you're a fan of the show, that's been anticipated for such a long time. And the writers did not disappoint. I think they wrote such an incredible scene. The first time we rehearsed it, I had chills just in rehearsal. Just them kind of just going through the paces of it, I was just like, oh my God, this scene is amazing. And so for me, when you have a scene like that with actors like that, and the writing is so strong, and there's so many layers, and there's so much history that's being kind of serviced in that thing, it's really just a matter of like, I just have to get it on film. That's all I have to do. I just let them do their thing. It's just get out of their way. And it's to build in those tension moments, you have to really believe that she might have him killed, that has to be a real possibility. Even if you, as a fan, you think, oh no, they can't possibly kill Peter Dinklage at this point in the show, but you should. I mean, my job is to trick you.
Well, Peter Dinklage pushed it when he says, "Then kill me right now," like finally wanting this to come to a head and willing to die for it.
You should have a moment where you think, my God, is she actually going to do it? But she doesn't. But yeah, I mean, they're both such fine actors. They both know their characters so well, and they bring out every single bit of juice that there is to get out of a scene like that. And there's a lot in this scene. I mean, it's the entire history of these two characters and all the things that he's done that have, like, in her mind, destroyed her life and destroyed her children and her father and everything. And it's all in there. And so it's full of emotion. It's full of tension. And they just get every single bit of, whatever there is to get out of that.
Yeah, the moment that really struck me is when Cersei, which I believe makes sure she knew that she was pregnant. Tyrion, she knows that that's his vulnerability.
Yes, well, that's a big question. Like, is she doing this by design? Is that something that she wants him to catch, or is it something he's just catching? And you can interpret that as you will, but
But I think Peter interpreted like you can see his face change, like you're pregnant,
he gets
how it
it.
means to him specifically too. Yeah.
Of course, he will. But it will. He knows her well enough that will be something that will change her, because if there's one thing that Cersei that is her kind of like kryptonite, it's children, right? And so the fact that she's going to have another child is going to have an impact on the way she makes decisions. And I think that is probably in his, although this ends up all being a ruse in the end, but I think to Tyrion, how does he end up getting her back in the dragon pit? It has to do with the fact that she's going to have a baby. And so clearly that discovery, even if she wanted him to discover it, in his mind is the thing that is going to make her not be as ruthless as she might otherwise be.
Yeah, that might be great when you have such great actors, because Tyrion just said it with his face. As a director, you don't have to use dialogue. And so that's what's special about that. Now, juxtaposed, like Jaime also challenges Cersei to death. How did you want to, from shooting standpoint, how did you want to contrast the two scenes with the two brothers facing off?
What's very interesting, because the scenes mirror each other quite a lot. I mean, there's a moment where it's like, is she really going to kill Tyrion? And it's like, is she really going to kill her brother, the other brother? and so like it's a very similar thing in a way. So I was a little bit like, are they too similar, these beats? But I think that the scenes are specific enough, and her relationship with each of them is different enough that the scenes don't feel like they're kind of like they feel like they're a mirror of each other, but they don't feel like they're like a retread of each other.
Well, Cersei's reaction was different with Jaime. She did give which he did not do for Tyrion.
I think she's pretty close to doing it with Jaime, actually. And but I think in the end, that is the thing about Cersei, is like family is very important to her, and like even if she has like, that she probably wants to kill Tyrion really badly, but I don't think it's that easy for her to do that, and certainly with Jaime, it's much more complicated. She really doesn't want to kill him. He's the only thing left. Like when he says, I'm all you have left. That's true. It is really all she has left. He's the only thing.
I thought it was nice because you directed the first episode where the map room was being painted.
Yes.
And the last one, it kind of shows this world's going to end, but it's fully painted.
Yes.
With the conversation of production designer, working with them and the art for that kind of, the wall and the whole floor map.
Yeah, that is hand painted, that floor, by this amazing artist in Belfast. And it took a long time to paint, and this is an incredible job. But those are two big chunky scenes. The one in the first episode is again another unusually long dialogue scene, two-hander, which I think it's like a 7-minute scene or something with just the two of them walking across that map, and we shot both of those scenes together. So we actually shot that big scene in the first episode and this scene in the last episode in the first week of shooting, actually, and which is a very interesting thing for the actors to play the beginning of their arc and the end of their arc of the season in the first week of shooting before they shot all the intervening scenes. So it was that was a big rehearsal on those scenes too. Like we really discussed those scenes in great detail, and the blocking of them is quite complicated too, because in terms of blocking, the actor can't go and pick anything up. There's nothing there. It's just a map. And it's a big open space, and especially for that first scene, it's a really tough one.
Must be nice for a TV director, because often you don't get to be the one that sets it up or pays it off.
Yeah,
that you actually can plan it together.
Yeah, but it was a lot to discuss with the actors too, because they hadn't played all those intervening scenes, and so we had to kind of discuss everything that happened in between those, and all those episodes in between that hadn't been shot yet, and see, well, where are you now, and how are you here, and his sense of betrayal at her in this last scene is informed by all the stuff that comes before it, and so a lot of that stuff had to be kind of worked through. So
Jaime, we get a nice little Jaime redemption. So he's going to honor his pledge.
Yeah.
But also, I really like Theon's redemption. Yes. Suddenly he's back to it.
Very satisfying.
He gets kind of forgiven by Jon Snow as much as he can do.
Yeah.
And how did you approach the fight scene? Because that redemption was very gritty, slightly different than other things. What was it for you, making sure that Theon's redemption would come out?
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting scene. Like it was, and then watching actually, I felt like, ooh, I was taking those punches, watching it. It's pretty brutal, actually. And I think, it is very satisfying, because Theon has been through so much on this show. And, he's every indignity that a human being can suffer. He's basically suffered on this show. and then you think as you're watching this, like, oh, it's happening again. Like he's just going to get the kicked out of him all over again. And then he comes back for the first time ever. And I think that his, it's a redemption in terms of him kind of getting his dignity back and getting a sense of purpose back and getting a reason to live back, which is to kind of get to save his sister. And it's very satisfying. And Alfie Allen is such a beautiful actor, I think. And it was great that scene with Jon Snow, which I thought was very moving, and he played it very beautifully. And then to have that other scene where he, just gets to show a different color too is really great. So I was very happy for him as an actor that he had those moments.
Yeah, because Alfie really, Theon never had warm, nice scenes. And throughout the whole entire series,
but I think that
until the Jon Snow.
Yeah, not. You're right. Not in the way of being like a kind of sensitive, emotional scene, but I think that there are many, many times where I really felt for him over the course of the show because he has suffered so much, especially at the hands of Ramsay, and so I think he has really earned a lot of kind of fan affection, or viewer affection, let's say. For all of that, and it's especially satisfying when characters like that finally get their own.
Yeah. Now, you started directing in season 5, and Sansa and Arya's characters have evolved greatly, especially over the whole entire show. But knowing how much they've been through, and how do you work with Sophie and Macy in the iconic Littlefinger scene to highlight their character growth and where they finally are?
Right. Again, that was a beautifully written scene, I think, too. So that really helped a lot. A lot of it was just sort of figuring out the blocking, because it's, in the end, it ends up being this very austere, very elegant kind of blocking. And there's a slight choreography of Arya, around Littlefinger, and that really sort of helped. I think that design of that thing really helped, but. The biggest thing with them is that the mislead had to really work. You had to really believe, like from that first scene with Littlefinger and Sansa, that she might actually kill her sister, and she might believe that that Arya is trying to kill her. And so I think, like, for me, the important thing was that as long as we are tracking this through, that we believe this might actually happen, then the turnaround becomes extremely satisfying. And then her turning the tables on Littlefinger and then finding that the sisters are actually colluding, they're working together, that is like such a satisfying moment, I think. And not just them, it's actually all the Stark children are working together, because now you have, what's his name?
Bran.
You got Bran, yeah.
Or the Three-Eyed Raven, I don't know.
Three-Eyed Raven, that guy, Isaac. It's the first time that the three of them are really they're really working as a family. And that I think is very satisfying too. And it's very important to me graphically to show that, like, once Littlefinger is exposed, that Arya now comes over to the table, and it's the three Stark children, and they're now a united front. And so Littlefinger's whole thing was about trying to be divisive and create, divisions between these kids and the family, and they've kind of gone behind his back, and they've figured everything out.
Well, the next mystery of this scene is, which I was wondering when I first saw it, he's actually going to kill Littlefinger or banish him or something else. Mm-hmm. How did you work with Aiden to capture? Because he had fear in his eye for the first time.
I think Aiden's performance in that scene is just so great. I mean, he's been great through the entire series, but I feel like that's probably the best performance he's ever given. And I don't know. I just love that. I think with the first part of your question was,
well, we now know that Sansa working together. We're now wondering what they're going to do to Littlefinger. Is there a chance like they might let him, take away his power, or
right? I think that once it was that's one of those things that when you read the script, you're like, oh my God, we're actually really killing him, and that was and because he is such a major character in the show. And anytime any major character gets killed, it's like on the show, it's a big deal, right? And I think for Aiden, it was a very bittersweet thing because, he made it quite far, to the end of season 7. Didn't make it quite to the end. But, so I think he felt good that he made it that long. And also that he went out on such a great scene. Like nobody could deny that. Like when you read it, you're like, oh my God, it's so satisfying. And so I think, when we, as we were discussing it and rehearsing it, we all felt like, okay, if it's got to happen, at least you get this amazing scene, right? Mm-hmm. And he really delivered. Like that's what was so amazing. Like when I think he got every possible thing that you could get out of that scene, as beautifully as it was written. And so it was all. Of course, it's very sad for everybody when you're shooting these kind of scenes, but there is also a sense of like, this is such a fantastic scene, and he's so great in it. So it couldn't be any better. Like under those circumstances, if you got to go like that, you know.
I did like the look with when he's on his knees looking up at Arya, knowing what's about to happen.
Yes, and I think, you know, again, like, you know, when you shoot these things, you know, we do like a number of takes, but when I saw when I was watching him do that take, and I was like, oh my God, that's it, that's the moment. You know, it's like there's so many of those moments actually, like that like little gulps that he takes, that moment of like you can't believe what's actually about to happen, or, you know, I mean, this is what's with really fine actors. I think it's really what's happening behind their eyes. Like that's the brilliance of what they're doing. And, you know, when you have an actor who's so alive and in the moment, and they cease to become, he's not Aiden, he's Littlefinger. And everything that Littlefinger would feel in that moment, you are feeling. And I lose myself in it watching it as a director. I'm just like with that character. And, you know, he just so did that in the scene. I was like, you know, I was on the verge of tears like the entire time.
Yeah, I just like the follow-up with just finally seeing Arya and Sansa together and happy.
Yeah.
Like just home, and that look when they're looking out on the thing was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, it's another beautifully written scene. And also very satisfying, I think, because especially after all this stuff where in the episodes before you think that they're working against each other, and that, you know, perhaps they are, you know, kind of not, you know, one is going to try to kill the other or usurp control over the other, and then at the end when you realize actually that they've worked through it on their own somehow, you know, off camera. And that they're sisters again. I think the Starks are kind of this amazing family, right? And I think they've been separated by circumstance for so long, and now they're, you know, it's like your favorite superheroes are back together again, and it's very satisfying.
Now, of course, one of the biggest reveals in the entire series is Jon Snow's lineage.
Yes.
Now go for it. He's a Targaryen. You know. But, you know, obviously the fans have been speculating and stuff like that. How did you go about making this exciting, you know, but even though many people have predicted it? What was the keys about making it dramatic, using the voiceover?
Well, I think the brilliance of it was having it come from Bran, you know, who's got all this kind of like inside knowledge, you know, three-eyed raven knowledge. And, you know, I think that doing it as a montage where we're bringing together like Ned Stark as a young man and Lyanna Stark dying, which was from a much, much earlier episode, and the wedding of Rhaegar Targaryen, which we hadn't seen, and so like we may have known a lot of, but we're really seeing it for the first time in this context, and it's all kind of coming together in this way that still feels kind of fresh. And this whole, I think the montage with Bran narrating it, and it's all complete news to Sam. Sorry, it's been a little while. And yeah, I think it all works because it's sort of given a kind of cinematic sort of new richness, you know, in the way it's all kind of coming out and being put together and being laid out. Plus, Jon and Dany are getting together. So it's not just like knowing that, but it's like now that we know that, oh my God, and they're making love. So it's like it's finding that out at the same time. Oh, and then oh my God, and Tyrion's watching. So it's like,
and then we remember their aunt and nephew.
Yes, all of that. You know, so it's informed by all that stuff, which that makes it all feel kind of new. And I was just saying before that if you're interested to watch something that's quite entertaining, if you watch reaction videos on YouTube, there is a bar somewhere where there's fans watching that episode for the first time, and that they're watching that entire sequence of Bran telling the whole story and the wedding and the love making, and people are freaking out, and it's so much fun to watch, like that whole thing. So check it out.
All right, since the pilot, we've been saying winter is coming, the White Walkers are coming, the White Walkers are coming. So when you actually got to read it and say, oh, I'm going to get to shoot this is kind of cool, did you able to enjoy it for a few moments? Or did you move into, oh my God, I got to shoot this?
Oh, both. I mean, I read it, like, and just as a reader, I was like, oh my God, this is like an unbelievable moment. And then the next thought is like, oh my God, I have to film this. So, and then the other thing is that it's like, this is one of those things, there's a sort of cliche in filmmaking that, you know, it's gonna be like one line in a script, Rome burns, and then it's like, but it's like 3 weeks of shooting, you know. And But so this is sort of like the wall comes down. It was like half a page, and you're like, that's going to end up being a 10-minute sequence in the show, which you have to completely create out of nothing, really. And so, I mean, it was written, but written in very spare kind of, detail. And so then it became a thing of it's a thing of imagination of how you're going to approach this. And so again, we start with storyboarding and me thinking about it dramatically, and also with the visual effects people contribute quite a lot into this conversation that are very early stages. And then we sort of, in effect, a sequence like that is really almost an animated sequence. It's 90% visual effects, but there are human elements there too. There's all the people on top of the wall, there's Tormund and all of that, and there's interaction between the not real dragon. Sorry to tell you that dragon's not real. But anyway, but there is real interaction between the fire and the people who are on the wall and all that kind of stuff. So there are real elements that we shoot, and then there's a lot of stuff that's pure visual effects, and how you marry those things becomes the big thing. But it has to all be planned, and I storyboard it as if it's all real, like that, as if dragons are real, as if the wall really exists, as if everything, and I storyboard it. Imagining what it will look like, and then you take each frame of the storyboard and you're like, okay, well, we could do the people on top of the wall, but everything else is a visual effect, for this particular frame. And for that frame, the fire, we can do real fire, which we turn blue, and then we have but there's no dragon, but there is there are little bits and pieces of each frame that is real, and you maybe have like 150 White Walkers, but it has to look like there's a million of them, and that kind of thing. So it's how many things are real, how many things become visual effects, and every frame, pretty much every shot, is dissected in terms of its elements. But you start first just thinking about it as a pure imaginary thing where everything is possible, and then you.
Well, for me, I mean, one of the key moments for me was Tormund's reaction. We need the human reaction because he did watch the dragon die.
Yes.
So we're now connecting, and not just it's a cool thing. We're seeing it. We're realizing there's a connection. The dragon is a character that we did love.
As I was saying with the show, it's always there's always a human POV. There's always like somebody that we care about who's involved in a situation. There's always something that makes it more personal, And so it's not just if it was just the dragon on the wall and nobody up there that we cared about, that wouldn't be the same scene.
All right, so we're going to circle back to an earlier episode you directed. You directed the episode where Jon Snow, for 2 episodes, was being resurrected. With a show in this magnitude, how hard was it to keep the secret from your family and friends?
For me, it's not that hard because I just have like a blanket thing. I just don't say anything to anybody, nobody. Like not even like the closest people next. I don't tell anybody anything. And so if you just have like you don't forget who you told what to. Or it's just like nobody knows anything, and that's it. But I don't think I've ever been asked as much about something as that before it actually happened. And that was a fascinating thing because it was really a cultural moment, that thing. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was like speculation on talk shows, and it was anybody who watched the show at all, everybody was speculating: is he dead? Is he not dead? Is he coming back? And it was just kind of crazy. And we were shooting in Croatia and Spain and Ireland, and like people all over the world were talking about it. It was not just like your friends, and so it was such a crazy thing to be in the middle of. And of course, I knew the answer, but but I was never going to say anything to anybody.
So you shot 6 episodes. What was your favorite scene to shoot? If you're going back, or something that maybe from one of the other episodes, or something like could be a spoiler. I liked it. One of my favorites was Tyrion with the dragons when he releases the dragons earlier.
Yes, Tyrion and the dragons. That was a great scene to shoot, and Peter was so fabulous with that. That's because he'd heard about dragons his entire life, but he'd never actually seen one. And then that moment where he goes down into the dragon, we called it Dragon Daycare. And he goes down to the dragons and has that moment of wonder with them was really a great sequence to shoot. There are so many. I couldn't even tell you because every episode had amazing things. I loved one of the season openers was Arya killing all the Freys. That was a great sequence. That was super. That was a scene that was not meant to be the opening scene of that episode, but when we shot it, I just knew it was like you have to start the episode with this scene because it's such a killer scene, and that was a no-brainer. I don't know. There were many.
So for you, I mean, Game of Thrones has, a rabid fan base, cultural phenomenon, Comic-Con, all these things. How's it been for you being part of it? To kind of, being able to share in this really once in a lifetime kind of experience and show.
It feels like a once in a lifetime thing in many ways, but it's interesting because when you're directing the show, you're just working. Like it's like you're working on something great and everybody's fabulous and it's a very special experience in every way. But it's like you're not so aware of all the hoo-ha that's happening out there because it's like, oh, I got this huge scene to shoot today, and how are we going to get through that? And you're it's the work of directing and making something. Doesn't matter what you're doing, is always the work of making it. And it's like how do we make the scene come to life? How do we, what are the logistical challenges? What are the artistic challenges? And how do you make it great? And so that's what you're thinking about every day when you're making a show. And very often you're like in the mud and you're wearing your worst clothes and you're getting rained on, or it's 150 degrees, or it's like whatever. It's like it's especially on this show. It's like you've got every kind of condition and everything. And so it's you're working. It's like instead of going to the factory every day, you go to the set and you're making something. And you only become aware just before the season starts to air. Then all the publicity stuff kicks into gear, and it's like on magazine covers, and it's like, and people start talking about it, and then it's like, wow, oh my God, there's all this interest, and like then it becomes like a real thing, like in terms of the public awareness. But before that, it's really just like the challenge of making the show, that as any show. But then looking back on it, like now it's the end of the whole thing, sadly. And it's like, yeah, it was so amazing to be a part of this thing that you guys love and that so many people love everywhere. And it has I think it's a very special show in the history of television, I think. And that my mother loves the show. She would never watch a fantasy show, and it's not just because I'm directing it. She genuinely loves the show. And all kinds of people embrace this show because it's great storytelling and people are moved by it and they're affected by it, and it kind of draws them in a way that so few things do. And so to be a part of that literally, I think that the finale was, I think, the highest rated episode of television in the history of television. And that it's kind of amazing, really. And that there was, and they, by the way, it shows in 140 countries on the same day.
Yeah, that's
so that's kind of like an unbelievable thing that everybody in the world is watching this in the same moment, right? So that's kind of crazy, really. So I'm very proud of that association, and equally happy that I've had the experience of working with a team of people that I've had to work with, and there is no other better team of people, and I've done many shows, and that it's like the most creative, the most brilliant, the most lovely group of people you could ever meet to a person. And I'm not being Pollyannish about this. I would say that you could not have a nicer group of actors, every single one of them. Pure delight and professional and lovely human beings, and the crew and the producers and everybody. It really is like a family, and people are incredible. So, that's very, very special. That goes beyond the cultural impact of the show. It's really just the experience of making the show. And, everybody, I think, on the show feels like they're a part of something really special. You're also tested in a way that for everybody, like the VFX people have never done anything that ambitious before. No. Everybody on the show has never done anything as ambitious as what this show's doing. But because you're dealing with people who are all, kind of like the top of their game, they're the top of their field, it all becomes possible, And I think if people know in this show that really anything's possible. And that's very unusual, where you feel like, like no matter how big the ask is, it could actually happen. We could actually pull this off, and that's very special.
All right, we do have time for a couple of questions from the audience.
When you're working with so many talented actors, how do you get the performance you want out of them, or how do you help them get this performance? And what advice would you give to a young director when communicating with actors in this regard?
Well, I think it really helps. There's a cliche that 90% of directing actors is casting, and I think if you have great actors, you don't have to give them that much. Doesn't mean you don't give them anything, but they're already 70% there, and then it's really just about shaping and nuance, and so it can be. And it's not just this show. It's the same thing would apply for any show and any performers. It's really just, giving them a suggestion of maybe think about this, or, that thing that happened all the way back there, I think that should inform what's happening in this scene. Or, let's try a different color. Let's, it's a little bit of like the secret sauce. It's hard to explain, what it is, but in general, I think it's helping an actor find something by suggestion, not by example. Like I would never say, do it like this, or say, that you don't do. But I think that by sort of talking around something, you get them to the point where they can have that discovery for themselves, and they understand what you need and what you're thinking, and hopefully they think that will work as well. I would never over-direct, never say too much. That gets confusing. But I think with helpful suggestion, you can get an actor close to where you want them to be. And especially actors that have a lot of tools in their tool belt, they know how to do that.
So in Game of Thrones, you see so many characters. Which one you feel personally most relatable? Like if you want to be one character in Game of Thrones, which one you would choose?
I'm sure I want to be anybody, but I can say that I'm kind of in awe of the young actresses in the show, like Sophie and Maisie, who are so talented and they've grown up on the show. They were such young kids at the beginning, and you can literally see them grow up on the show. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and watch the first episode again, you see how tiny they were, and so talented even then. But they've just so grown as people, as actors, physically and mature in terms of maturity and ability. I've loved, as a viewer, I've loved watching them, and as a director, I love working with them because they're so fresh and fun and gifted. It's kind of like an amazing thing to behold. Like, when Maisie acts, it's like I don't even know what to say. She's so great, and she needs nothing from a director, really. I mean, very little. She's amazing, and I'm kind of in awe of them in a way. I mean, everybody's great on the show. They're all fantastic, but I think because they're so young and so skilled, they just kind of blow me away.
I was wondering if in the course of filming, you've ever had any actors come into close calls or dangerous situations in the course of filming, whether it's a dangerous set environment or they had to do something kind of extreme, if you've ever had any close calls.
Nothing. We've had a lot of stunts that were quite amazing. There's an amazing stunt crew on this show, and nobody would ever be put in real danger. It looks dangerous sometimes, what you're looking at. But no, I mean, I never felt that anybody was really in danger. We've had, I'm trying to think. There was a scene on a rope bridge that we had with Euron Greyjoy when he kills his brother in the rain, and we shot that at night in Belfast in a quarry, and a very high rope bridge, actually, not as high as it is in the show, but it was still quite high. And the actor playing Euron's brother was elderly and older, not elderly, but older, and that was the very difficult thing to do. It was so cold, and that rain from rain machines is it's like you're being hit by pebbles. It's not a soft, gentle rain. It's really and they're not wearing very much protection, and shooting that in the freezing cold at night, that was not easy for the actors. And they had to deliver dialogue, and he had to throw one of them over the side. And so it was that was probably one of the more excruciating things that I've had with an actor that they had to go through. But he was pretty amazingly game to do it, but it was tough. Things on horses are always, challenging and a little scary. But we have an amazing horse crew. There's really, the Dothraki Riders, oh my God, those guys are unbelievable. In the beginning of the show, when they all come riding through the Unsullied, those guys are unbelievable. They can really ride. And I think in the Loot Train episode, which I'm sure you've all seen, they're standing on horses and riding and doing acrobatic stuff that's really exceptional. But these are all professional stunt people. The actors are never put in a situation where they're really in danger.
I was wondering, can you explain us the last scene with Peter Dinklage? I'm a bit confused because I can see him maybe being in love with her or seeing the alliance of a bit dangerous, but he did bring himself those two together. So I'm confused. What is this look on his face? He doesn't know that Jon Snow is actually Targaryen yet, right? So what is it? Can you tell us?
Full disclosure, I wanted to ask the same question.
Well, it's a deliberately ambiguous moment, but it's partly what you said. Which I mean, for me, there was two things. And Peter and I talked about what that moment really was, and I talked about it with the writers too. And I think it's meant to be slightly ambiguous. I mean, on one level, he is kind of in love with Daenerys in a way, and so there's that slight bit of tension in that, but then I think the most important thing really in that scene is that there is a greater thing that Tyrion, his greater objective in this whole thing is to, keep the world stable, to prevent some horrible calamity from befalling everybody, right? So this thing happening with Jon and Dany getting together is a potential thing that could disrupt that, because nobody knows, he doesn't know how that's going to play out. Like, what happens if they end up fighting and hating each other, and then they break up, and then what happens to the alliance? Once you bring personal sexual stuff into something, anything can happen. It's loaded. What happens if the two of them get together and they decide that they don't want to be in an alliance with anybody else, or they don't need him anymore, or who knows what can happen? The point is just that it's a disruption. It's like the two of them getting together. We don't know what that means, but it means something. And he's a smart enough tactician to know that those two getting together, there's going to be consequences one way or another. And for someone who likes to know how everything's going to play out, this is something he can't predict. So I think for me, it was always about that. It was always about, okay, the two of them are getting together. This is not an ordinary hookup. And so it's what are the consequences of this going to be? And he doesn't really know. And so that is a bit unnerving for him to not know.
What I was curious about in reunion heavy episodes like this one, especially, how do you reconcile all those themes coming together at once while still doing justice to each one of the characters?
Well, I think that you just make sure that the history informs the scenes. Because that anybody who's, and fans of the show are real fans. They've really been following the show, and they know where these characters are coming from, all the stuff that they've been through. So when people come together, those scenes have to be informed by that history. And the actors know that history very well too. So it's really just a matter of me being aware of it, of the actors, even though they know it, but really knowing it in that moment as they're playing it, and thinking about, what does this reunion moment actually mean? And it's, you're always playing text and subtext, and these scenes, there's stuff that's on the page, and then there's all the stuff that's underneath it. And so it's just being aware that there's so much subtext in all these things, and it all is dependent upon history and knowledge of character and knowledge of backstory. And, so I think as much as we are conscious that the fans and the viewers are really tapped into that, and that these moments are very meaningful to them, and they know what every one of these moments means. Nobody is going to know more than the fans know, because they've really been following. And so you just have to make sure that you're servicing all of that, that you are aware that people are bringing all this knowledge and history, and that the scene has to be informed by that. So I think as long as everybody's, consciously thinking about those things, it'll be in there, even if it's not in the words, it'll be in there in the playing of it. And then it's me just putting the camera in the right place and making sure that you capture it.
Just that simple, huh?
Just that simple.
Well, we always ask the same last question of our guests. Is there a film or TV show that inspired you when you were younger? Something that maybe our aspiring production or directing students should take a look at?
That's interesting. I was actually really inspired by movies. I was a television addict as a kid too, and I watched everything. Everything from LA Law to All in the Family. I was kind of into network TV. There was really no cable TV at that time. I'm old.
Me too.
So I was kind of influenced by everything, but I never really thought that I'd become a TV director. This is something very relatively recent in my life, and like starting from 6 Feet Under, which doesn't seem that recent to you guys, but for me, I had 15 years of being an independent feature filmmaker before I directed an episode of television. And so, what influenced me most were things that I watched with a view to being a feature filmmaker, but a more of the more auteurist type. I wrote and directed my 3 movies, and I was very influenced by growing up in Canada, which is I grew up in Toronto and had a lot of access through the Toronto Film Festival, but through the art house film world to European cinema, British cinema, and American cinema. So I saw a lot, and my father was Polish and my mother is English, and the things that influenced, like my father loved Rossellini. Those are movies, he saw Rossellini's movies when he was a young kid, and Les Enfants du Paradis, the Marcel Carné movie, was a movie that I heard about a lot as a kid growing up, which I highly recommend. Children of Paradise, check that out. So it was European cinema actually had a huge influence on me. I loved Antonioni, I loved Fellini, I loved Francois Truffaut. These are the movies that really kind of had a big impact on me and influenced my filmmaking to a great degree. And I think, fortunately, when I got into television, it's when television was really changing. And I never saw a role for myself in TV because even though I appreciated LA Law and All in the Family, I never, ever, ever thought I would direct these kinds of shows. And it wasn't really until HBO started to do The Sopranos and 6 Feet Under and even Sex and the City, like things that were like more provocative and more auteurish in a way. Like they were very much kind of reflections of their creators they had a strong vision, these shows. Then I thought, I can identify with that. I can relate to that as an independent filmmaker because this is television's version of independent filmmaking. It's like single point of view, work. It's an Alan Ball show, or it's David Chase, or it's whatever, David Milch, or it's like these are people who really have a strong vision for something, and that's what they're creating. And so my interest in auteurist filmmaking is really the thing that kind of led me to these kinds of shows in a strange way. And those are the biggest influences on me, really, as opposed to other TV shows or something.
Well, again, I want to thank HBO for letting us do this awesome event and putting it together. And thank you for coming to share your insights, especially with the team.